My name is Jacob Posey, and my capstone paper is titled Lifespan of Nonprofit Organizations, Indicators of the Final Stage and Alternatives to Death. It is pretty clear that the world is not a perfect place. Many people and animals have needs that go unmet every single day. These include food, shelter, access to health-related services. The list goes on and on. Nonprofits help to fill the gap for these people by providing services that meet those needs. Nonprofits exist to serve a specific set of beneficiaries for the purpose of making their lives better and as a result making the world a better place to live. Now, the fact that nonprofits do a lot of good things in the world doesn't mean that they are exempt from the struggles found in it. Each nonprofit goes through a life cycle and faces challenges that threaten its survival. Why is it important for nonprofits to survive? Why should we even care? There seems to be so many of them that it wouldn't hurt anybody if a few of them died out. And besides, no nonprofit I know serves me directly, so what's the big deal? That may be true, but consider that philanthropy is defined as voluntary action for the public good. The key here is public good. When nonprofits perform services to meet previously unmet needs of a specific set of beneficiaries, those people benefit directly. Though it may not seem to affect you and me personally, a society is only as strong as its weakest link. Through the betterment of the lives of others, our society is stronger. This is an indirect result that everyone benefits from, even if the nonprofit does not serve you directly. For example, a soup kitchen that feeds homeless people may not feed you, but it keeps a homeless man from committing a desperate crime. Thus you, who could have been the unsuspecting victim of that crime, benefits from the work of the nonprofit. Knowing this, it is essential that nonprofit leaders understand the life cycle that their nonprofit goes through, be able to recognize the different stages within that life cycle, be able to see warning signs that the nonprofit is approaching the end of its life cycle, and know potential alternatives to death that they can explore so that the nonprofit can remain relevant by continuing to provide necessary services. For the literature review section of my capstone, I researched the life cycle of nonprofit organizations to answer questions that proactive nonprofit leaders would have. I found that there are 5 life stages according to Judith Simon. These are imagine and inspire, found and frame, ground and grow, produce and sustain, and the final stage, review and renew. Simon also gave nonprofit leaders 7 distinct areas of a nonprofit where signs can be present that it is in the final stage of review and renew. It is critical that nonprofit leaders be able to recognize warning signs in each of these 7 areas because while these signs may only exist in one area, take the area of finances for example, death may be imminent even if all of the other 6 areas appear healthy. In other words, programming may look great, the staff may be healthy, but if the nonprofit is struggling in the area of finances, then death can be around the corner. I present in my paper the life stages, the areas within a nonprofit to look for warning signs, and what those warning signs often are so that nonprofit leaders can be aware and recognize them. All of this information is nice for nonprofit leaders, but it's somewhat useless if alternatives to dying aren't presented. I researched 4 different alternatives to death that nonprofit leaders can explore if they recognize warning signs in one or more areas of their own nonprofit. These alternatives include alliance, merger, changing the culture of the nonprofit, especially within the area that needs renewal, and changing mission. I then researched and gave examples of nonprofits that have employed each of these techniques to improve their overall health. The examples show that in the right circumstances, one or multiple of these alternatives can be a successful alternative to a nonprofit being forced to shut down. One option that I was not expecting also came up in the research. I intended the paper to show nonprofit leaders how to keep their nonprofits from shutting down, but I found that shutting down may accomplish the most voluntary action for the public good if all of the factors are right. An example is given in my paper of a nonprofit that chose none of the four proposed alternatives because it could maximize the positive impact for its beneficiaries through a strategic shutdown and distribution of funds. I found this very compelling and present it as an option for nonprofit leaders to seriously consider if the four proposed alternatives turn out to not be viable options. The solution that I propose for nonprofit leaders to help their organizations thrive, provide necessary services, and ultimately avoid death is to educate themselves. They need to know the life cycle that their organization is inevitably experiencing. They need to know the 7 areas that they need to evaluate within that nonprofit and recognize warning signs of poor health in each area. They need to know and be willing to explore the 4 alternatives to death. And they need to make the best decision given all the factors for their nonprofit specifically. No one alternative trumps the others. They are all viable in certain situations, so nonprofit leaders should explore every avenue. One of my most important recommendations to nonprofit leaders is that they be in a constant state of evaluation for each of the 7 areas given by Judith Simon. Early diagnosis of issues in any area can lead to a better chance for success through one of the proposed alternatives. Due to the nature of the successful examples I found, I recommend that nonprofit leaders explore the alternatives in this order: alliance, changing culture, merger, and then changing mission. The reason for this order is because alliances have a greater chance for success if they are employed early. These can even benefit an organization that is not experiencing any poor health in any area and therefore eliminate the need for renewal later on. Changing the culture happens second because the organization must be experiencing poor health in some area to justify this action. This option can be successful at any stage of the life cycle, but like an alliance, the earlier the better. The third alternative, a merger, can save a nonprofit even at the end of its life cycle. This is where a stronger nonprofit absorbs a struggling nonprofit. This option gives the struggling nonprofit an opportunity to continue to provide necessary services under a different name while it does something like change its culture. Changing mission is recommended last because this really only applies, in my estimation, to nonprofits that have completely accomplished their mission. If the current mission is unaccomplished and the change in mission is just in order to survive, I recommend that one of the other alternatives or even strategic shutdown be employed. I also recommend that nonprofit leaders be humbly admit when none of the proposed alternatives will effectively save the organization, and in this scenario choose a strategic shutdown that will maximize impact for the nonprofit's beneficiaries. Further research needs to be conducted on this topic. I was only able to find before and after case study research on the merger option. This evidence gave very strong support for the merger option. For the other 3 alternatives, I was unable to find case study research and only found specific examples of nonprofits successfully utilizing these alternatives. Now, this evidence is still very compelling, and I still think these 3 alternatives are very valid options for nonprofit leaders to consider. However, case study research needs to be performed for alliances, changing culture, and changing mission if it has not already been done, in order to strengthen or refute the validity of these 3 alternatives. In conclusion, nonprofit leaders need to be aware of the life cycle stages, the signs of each stage, the different areas that signs can exist, that a nonprofit is approaching its end, how to transition well from one stage to the next, and alternatives to dying. With this information, nonprofit leaders can take steps to help their organizations avoid death or even approach death in the first place at any point in the nonprofit life cycle.